Good morning. This is the class for first year BA. We had been seeing the great epic Mahabharata. Today we will conclude the section on Mahabharata, and we will go on to another module, that is Ramayana. And with that, the 5 modules for the first semester will be ended. So we have seen the older generations coming in the story of Mahabharata. We have said that Mahabharata, the main story is about the rivalry between two groups, Kauravas and Pandavas. Now, how these two groups came into existence, that's what we had been seeing from the older generations. How the dynasty of the Hastinapura, they were passed on to the 2 princes, that is Dhritarashtra and Pandu. They were the 2 princes, and then because Dhritarashtra was born blind, the kingship was passed on to Pandu, to the great dissatisfaction of the sons of Dhritarashtra himself and the 100 sons, the eldest son being Duryodhana, then Dushasana, and all of them. And along with their uncle, they were trying to scheme, plot and plan to destroy the Pandavas. Somehow the Pandavas were always saved. And if you remember that Pandu could not have any children because of a curse he had on him by one of the sages, because he shot the arrow and unwittingly or unintentionally it hit him, and he cursed Pandu that if ever he indulges in a sexual act, he would immediately die. And because of that, he could not rear children. Meanwhile, we have also learned about what happened to, or how Kunti had received a boon from the sage, one of the sages, that she could invoke any god for children, and therefore she uses this special favor or boon in order to get 3 sons, that is Yudhishthira, Bhima and Arjuna. Then she shares this special mantra with Madri, and she also receives twins. Thus there are 5 sons of Pandu, or Pancha Pandavas. And then there are 100 sons for Dhritarashtra, who was born blind, but among them, among the 2 brothers, the eldest is of Pandu's first son, that is Yudhishthira. And then he was crowned king, much to the dissatisfaction of Duryodhana, and since then the rivalry starts, and it ends up in the Kurukshetra war. And we have also seen yesterday in the class how they had planned, or they were challenged to a dice game, and then the dice game, Yudhishthira was defeated and he lost everything. That is his kingdom, his wealth, property, then himself, his brothers, and the common wife, that is Draupadi. And then the punishment was that they would be exiled for 12 years, and 1 year they should live in unrecognized or incognito, unrecognized by the group, that is Kauravas. And if they are found out in the span of 1 year, then another 12 years of exile, and again 1 year of life in the society unnoticed and unrecognized by the Kauravas. So the Kauravas' plan was that Pandavas should never set in the kingdom, and they found a beautiful way of eliminating them in this way. However, things did not work as they had planned. The 12 years were over. 1 year they lived incognito or unknown, or the Kauravas did not find them out, and therefore the term of the punishment was over. They returned and claimed for the kingdom, or the half of the kingdom, which Duryodhana was not willing to part with. So they did not even agree to have so much of land in the kingdom wherein they would be able to build a house and live. They were ready to give up. Pandavas were ready to give up the right to the kingdom, but still Duryodhana would not agree for that. So there was no other way other than to settle it with the battle. So that is where it ends up. So Mahabharata means the great battle which took place for 18 days in order to settle the issue between the Kauravas and Pandavas. So they were the two main groups, but along with them what happens during the exile, the stories, so it goes on, it becomes a great epic, a big story, a big idihasa or history it has become. So in all that we will see always the theme that is recurring, the fight between the good and the bad, dharma and adharma. So the rift that is going on. And finally we come to the stage of the battle, that is Kurukshetra. So all the princes, the small princes, the princely kingdoms, they were drawn into the battle. They had to take a stand either with the Pandavas or with the Kauravas, and therefore a great battle took place, and that's also for 18 days. So many kingdoms joined together, and the fight went on for 18 days. We have heard of Krishna. He himself was a priest, one of the princes, and therefore Krishna takes part in a non-combatant role as a charioteer for Arjuna. Before the battle, Arjuna, seeing the opposing army, includes many relatives that he loved, including his great-grandfather Bhishma and his teacher Drona, he has got doubts about the battle and fails to lift the Gandiva bow. Krishna wakes him up to the call of duty in the famous Bhagavad Gita section of the epic. So Bhagavad Gita is part of Mahabharata, one of the episodes, and that itself has become a separate book or dealt very much. So much so, even though people may not have read very much into Mahabharata, but definitely the Gita Upadesha or the section from Mahabharata is read widely by many. Though initially sticking to the chivalrous notions of warfare, both sides soon adopt dishonorable tactics. So in war there is no just war as such, no moral war. They would employ all kind of tactics and dirty tricks also in order to defeat. So all aim or attention is on how to win the war. So both the sides, first they were very frivolous notions on warfare, later on they indulged in very dishonorable tactics. At the end of 18 days battle, only Pandavas they remained, and with their allies. All the others were dead and put to death. So it was a great battle, so many lost their life. Now we come to the end of Pandavas. So what happened? Gandhari blindfolded, supporting Dhritarashtra and following Kunti. When Dhritarashtra became old and infirm, they retired to forest. So at the end of this battle, so Dhritarashtra himself was blind, and then his wife Gandhari, and then Kunti, they three depart into the forest seeing all this carnage. So after seeing the carnage, that means all her sons, 100 sons, their relations, wives, sons, and everybody is put to death. So seeing the carnage, Gandhari, who had lost all her sons, curses Krishna to be witness to a similar annihilation of his family. So that is Gandhari's curse on Krishna. Krishna himself was God, and he could have put an or seen to it that such a carnage does not take place, but he did not do, and therefore Gandhari curses him that in a way as she had experienced, so he also would experience an annihilation of his family. For though divine and capable of stopping the war, he had not done so. Krishna accepts the curse which bears fruit 36 years later. So there we see the annihilation of the dynasty or the kingdom which Krishna was ruling. Then when this happened, Pandavas knew that it was time for them to depart from this world. So Pandavas, who had ruled the kingdom meanwhile, decided to renounce everything. Clad in skins and rags, they retired to Himalaya and climbed towards heaven in their bodily form. So one by one, according to the order and depending on the gravity of their evil which they had done, so one by one get eliminated. Finally only Yudhishthira reaches to the heavenly gates, and there was some trial before his entry into. So one by one the brothers and Draupadi fall on their way. As each one stumbles, Yudhishthira gives the rest the reason for their fall. So as they move towards Himalaya, the heavenly abode, one by one retires, falls down dead on the way, and Yudhishthira gives the rest the reason for their fall. Draupadi was partial to Arjuna, Nagula and Sahadeva, were vain and proud of their looks, and Bhishma and Arjuna were proud of their strength and archery skills respectively. Only the virtuous Yudhishthira, who had tried everything to prevent the carnage, and the dog remained. The dog reveals himself to be the god of Yama, also known as Yamadharmaraj, and then takes him to the underworld where he sees his siblings and his wife. So that way we come to the final ending or final part of the Mahabharata. After explaining the nature of the test, Yama takes Yudhishthira back to heaven and explains that it was necessary to expose him to the underworld because Rajantya Naragam Dhruvam, any ruler who has to visit the underworld at least once. Yama then assures him that his siblings, his wife, would join him in heaven after they had been exposed to the underworld for a measure of time according to their vices. So one is taken to the underworld depending on the type and the gravity of the vices which one has committed. Arjuna's grandson Parikshit rules after them and dies bitten by a snake. His furious son Janmejaya decides to perform a snake sacrifice, that is Sarpapatra, in order to destroy the snakes. It is at this sacrifice that the tales of his ancestors are narrated to him. So the whole story of Mahabharata, it intervenes or interwoven with so many other different plots and stories. So that's why it becomes a huge epic. The story within the story. The central story is about the rivalry between the two. That is the Kauravas and Pandavas. And now we have been told about the ancestry of the Kauravas and Pandavas. How did they come into the occupation of the Hastinapura dynasty? And what were the pre-story that was existing, or how the dynasty was handed over to them? And then what happened to them? The culmination of the great battle and the aftermath of the battle. That is the narration about the whole of Mahabharata. The reunion, Mahabharata mentions that Karna and Pandavas and Dhritarashtra's sons eventually ascended to Swarga and attained the state of gods and banded together, serene and free from anger. So all the rivalry which they had exhibited when they were on earth, the true fractions, that is of the Kauravas and Pandavas, bitter enemies to each other, and this was forgotten once they reached heaven and they were banded together as one. So serene and free from all anger. So that is the final ending of the great battle of Mahabharata. So in all we will see that how the great epic which was written a long time ago and depicting or showing, that is the rivalry that was existing, the good and the fight between the good and the bad, and different stories coming together. So Mahabharata is full of characters, and we will be able to represent one or the other as we read through the great epic, the story. Different stories are knit together. So as the exile is going on for 12 long years, so all what is happening there, and in between how the kingdom or the ruling is going on by the Kauravas, what is happening on this side. So all this put together, it becomes a big story or a huge epic. A history or itihasa it becomes. And then in this same we have also that just before the beginning of the battle, the great battle, that's a battle at Kurukshetra, wherein both the armies are drawn on the Kaurava side and the Pandava side, and one with 9 divisions, other with 11 divisions, like that, so many, and looking at the mighty army. And then for Arjuna for a time feels that it is unjust. It's not at all worth waging a war with own relatives, kids and kin, own teachers of whom he knew and loved them, his own great grandfather Bhishma, Drona the teacher who taught them archery and the art of war, and all of them have to be killed in the war, which Arjuna feels it's not proper, it's not right. And he feels let down, and he would say that, no, I'm not going to fight. I'm going to lay down the arms and go back to the forest. There it is much more serene peace and calm. I don't have to engage in this bloodshed of my own relatives. A kingdom devoid of them, what is the use of that? So he begins to question, is there any worth in waging a war when absolutely there is no meaning at all, and only few will be left in the kingdom, and what is going to be the effect of that waging a war? So therefore he has got a remorse of conscience, or he feels let down and he did not want to wage a war. Then comes the call of Krishna, wake up call of Krishna, telling him his duty, the dharma, that is so. Where is your duty or where is your dharma? You are a Kshatriya, it's your duty to fight, to restore back the dharma over the adharma. And that's where we have the great Upadesha by Krishna to Arjuna, Gita Upadesha. Many themes occur there or appearing there, but just before the war. So background is the Kurukshetra, and then Krishna giving his advice, piece of advice, and finally shows himself the reality of his nature in order to make him believe that he himself is an avatara and he has come down in order to restore good over the evil. And therefore it was a fight between these two forces. And finally we have that great Mahabharata, and that will be the final ending of that story with regard to the Mahabharata. Now we go on to another module, that is about the Ramayana. So we have the Mahabharata and Ramayana. There are some similarities which we can find in the story about, more or less, that is, there is a kind of exile for the good person, as it happened in the case of Pandavas. For no fault of their own, only thing they lost in the game of dice, but it was a plan or a manipulation done by the Kauravas in order to eliminate the whole lot of Pandavas. So Kauravas schemed and found a way to defeat the Pandavas in the game of dice. And Yudhishthira had a weakness with regard to playing the dice, game of dice, and there he loses everything. His wealth, power, kingdom, position, himself, his brothers, Draupadi, their wife, and everything. Finally, what is left? Only the punishment. And the punishment was that he has to, or the whole lot of them have to go in exile for 12 years. A similar strain of thought, or just running on the same line with regard to Rama. So we got into Ramayana summary. What is Ramayana? The moment we hear about Ramayana, That is, of course, it is named after the great hero Rama, Ramayana. So we go into the summary of Ramayana. Born during an age when demon Ravana terrorized the world, Rama is the virtuous, wise and powerful prince of Ayodhya. As a young man, he is able to accomplish what no other man has ever done. He lifts the strings of the bow of Shiva, and by so doing, he earns the right to marry the beautiful Sita. The whole Ramayana is the story of the love story between Rama and Sita. As we have seen in the great epic Mahabharata, the central story is about the rivalry between the two groups or brothers, two brothers, that is Dhritarashtra and Pandu and their sons. So the two groups or two cousins and their rivalry, and finally ending up in a great battle of Mahabharata. So similarly, we will see here the story is centered about the love story between Rama and Sita. Rama is a good king or a very powerful prince of Ayodhya, and he wins the right to marry the beautiful Sita. Just when he is about to ascend the throne in Ayodhya, so he is the prince of Ayodhya, and there is his father. His father Dasharatha is forced to exile him for 14 years to the forest due to a vow made long ago. Similar strain what we have seen in that of in the Mahabharata. Why? That is Bhishma had to make a vow of celibacy on account of his father's desire to marry Satyavati, and therefore the father of Satyavati makes the king to vow before him that before his death he will give the right of succession to the kingdom to the sons born in the wedlock between the king and the Satyavati, his daughter. So in order to make sure that Bhishma will never marry and there would be any sons for him, so Bhishma is made to make another vow for lifelong celibacy. And that's what we see, and there a similar way. And in the same way we have seen also what happened to the Pandava group. That they lost the game of dice and they were sent into exile for 12 years in exile, and 1 year to be living in the society unrecognized and unnoticed by the Kaurava group. They should not be found out. A similar strain is here in which is happening in the Ramayana, wherein Rama is about to ascend to the throne of Ayodhya, and then his father, that is Dasharatha, had to exile him for 14 years to the forest due to a vow made long ago. Unruffled, Rama accepts the exile. His wife Sita and his loyal brother Lakshmana accompany him. In the forest, the princely brothers kill many demons and visit many wise men and women. So whole Ramayana is also again another story, or many things are put together. So what happens during the exile of 14 years, or Kananavasa or Vanavasa? What has happened to them, or what is happening to them? That also is part of the story, just as what we have seen in that of the Mahabharata, wherein during the exile of 12 years, how things have been faring, what is happening, that is forming also part of the story. So here in the Ramayana we will see Rama is exiled for 14 years into the forest on account of Dasharatha's vow which he made in order to marry the wives, so that this promise he had made that he would make, or the sons born out of that wedlock would be made or the rightful heirs to the kingdom. And therefore on account of that, Rama had to go in exile, and he did not want to displease his father, or he thought that it was his rightful duty to respect the promise which his father had made. Therefore, he agrees to go into exile for 14 years. And then he is accompanied by his faithful wife Sita and his brother Lakshmana, and accompany them. The evil demon Ravana hears of Sita's beauty and kidnaps her. He has fallen in love with her and tries to seduce her, but she rebuffs his advances for nearly 10 months. Desperate to win her back, Rama and Lakshmana form an alliance with the monkey king Sugriva and invade Lanka with an army of monkeys. After many violent battles, Rama defeats Ravana and wins back Sita. He is concerned that she has been unfaithful during her long captivity, and so Sita undergoes a fire test, a trial by fire, to prove her chastity. Rama takes her back, and they return to rule Ayodhya for many wonderful years. That is the one version of the Ramayana. So there are different versions with regard to the Ramayana, how the things have been interpreted. So one version is that she is put to test by fire, so to prove her chastity. If she were not to be chaste, then as she walks through the fire, she will get burned and immolate herself. That will be the end of Sita. But she stood the test by fire, and she walked in the midst of the fire unharmed, and then Rama takes her back, and then they together, happy ending. Another interpretation or given to that is that in another version of the tale of the same, that is Ramayana, is that Rama hears people gossiping about Sita's imagined indiscretions, and he banishes her into the forest, where she gives birth to Rama's twins. Sita and her children confront him many years later. He tries to explain his harsh action to Sita, but she vanishes into the earth to escape him. So that is another version. So in the same story is interpreted in different way in different lands. So it is not the same way that is understood, or the interpretation that has gone. We will be able to relate ourselves to the story in a little more better way when we analyze some of the main characters which are in the Ramayana. So the very name of Ramayana that we have, that Rama is the main. So who is Rama? Rama is the son of the king Dasharatha and Queen Kausalya. Rama is the prince of Ayodhya. He is an avatara of Vishnu, the blue god and the sustainer of the worlds. He is also a virtuous, strong and just man in his own right. He is married to Sita, whom he loves deeply. He has a strong bond with his brother Lakshmana as well. So we have a description about Rama. Who is Rama? So Rama is the son of the king Dasharatha and Queen Kausalya. Rama is the prince of Ayodhya, the son of Dasharatha and Kausalya, the would-be prince of Ayodhya. He is an avatar of Vishnu, the blue god and the sustainer of the worlds. He is also virtuous, strong and a just man in his own right. He is married to Sita, whom he loves very deeply. He has a strong bond with his brother Lakshmana as well. So that is about a little description about Rama. And who is Sita? Sita's father, King Janak, found her lying in a furrow on sanctified ground and decided to raise her as his daughter. She marries Rama and loves him so much that she follows him into exile. She is famed for her virtue and beauty and is regarded as an avatar of the goddess Lakshmi, Vishnu's consort. So all this story is knit together with the gods and goddesses. So Rama an avatara of Vishnu and Sita is an avatara of Lakshmi, the consort of Vishnu. So Sita's father King Janak sees her or found her lying in a furrow of unsanctified ground and decided to raise her as his own daughter. So we have Rama and Sita. Then who is Ravana? Ravana is the Rakshasa who performed penance for the god Shiva for many years. So Ravana is the Rakshasa who performed penance before God Shiva for many years and in return received a great blessing from the god. He cannot be killed by any god, demon or other divine being. That was the boon what he was asking for. So we will be able to see in all through, that is of the Mahabharata and Ramayana and similar writings, that people sitting in deep tapas, meditation, in order to attain to a boon from God. And we can see that they are forced to give the boon for the penance and the tapas which they are undertaking. In a similar way, Ravana is a Rakshasa who performed penance before the god of Shiva for many years, and he received the boon that he will never be killed by, or he cannot be killed by any god, demon or other divine being. His arrogance combined with great intelligence and power has led him to rule over much of the earth, spreading terrible evil everywhere he goes. So Ravana is an incarnation of evil. And with the boon which he has received, he has become all the more intolerant and arrogant. Combined with these two, the great intelligence he has got and the arrogance, he becomes the real incarnation of the evil. Who is Lakshmana? Lakshmana, the son of Dasharatha and brother of Rama, is deeply devoted to his brother, whom he follows through many dangers and adventures and quests. He is married to Sita's younger sister Urmila. So Dasharatha and that is a son of King Dasharatha and brother of Rama. So Rama and Lakshmana, they are brothers and deeply devoted to his brother, whom he follows in exile and many dangers and adventures and quests. He is married to Sita's sister Urmila. King Dasharatha, king of Ayodhya, father of Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata and Shatrugna. Of all his three sons, he loves Rama most deeply and tries to shelter the boy from any danger. He is a good king, kind but just and well liked by his people. That is Dasharatha, King Dasharatha. So king of Ayodhya, father of Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata, Shatrugna. Of all the four, or Rama, Lakshmana, Bharata and Shatrugna, that is the four. Among these four, he loves Rama, of all his three sons. He loves Rama most deeply and tries to shelter the boy from any danger. He is a good king and liked by his people. Now we have another character in the Ramayana, Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra is a great sage and wise man who was once a king. Through long meditation, he gained a number of magical powers. He takes Rama on a quest to defeat a demon and to lift the bow of Shiva, the first step in the future king's great journey. So it is Vishwamitra, a great sage, who dominates the scene, especially in that of Ramayana. Vishwamitra, great sage, through long meditation he gained a number of magical powers. He takes Rama on a quest to defeat a demon and lift the bow of Shiva, the first step in the future king's great journey. That is a Vishwamitra. So we are analyzing few of the characters which are dominant figures in Ramayana. There is Ganga. Ganga is a goddess, the daughter of Himavan. Because of her incomparable beauty, she was given to the Devas and she became the Milky Way. Later, Shiva brought her down to earth and she became the river Ganges. That is the goddess Ganga. Shiva is part of a great trinity in Hinduism along with Vishnu and Brahma. He is a great ascetic and often sits in meditation. He is able to tame the power of other gods, devas and supernatural beings, and he often grants blessings and wishes to those who sit in meditation, tapasya. His wife is Parvati. So Shiva is depicted as one of the Trinity, that is the person Trinity in the Hindu Trinitarian Trinity, which that is Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. That's the three Murtis. And Shiva is given or is able to have the power over other gods, devas and supernatural beings, and he often grants blessings and wishes to those who sit in tapas. His wife is Parvati. So we have seen or we are seeing through some of the dominant characters which are appearing in the Ramayana. Who is Lava? Along with the Kusha, one of the youths to whom Valmiki taught Ramayana that he received from Narada. He is one of the sons of Rama but does not know this. That is Lava Kusha, the twins to whom Sita gave birth. Kusha, along with Lava, one of the youths whom Valmiki taught Ramayana that he received from Narada. He is one of the sons of Rama but does not know this. So Lava, Kusha, the twins whom Sita brought. They are the sons of Rama. Then we have some more of the characters. Worth mentioning is Kaikeyi, the third and the youngest wife of the king Dasharatha. So he had three wives. The youngest one was Kaikeyi, the mother of Bharata. She is famed for her beauty. After she saved the life of Dasharatha in a battle, he offered to grant anything she would ask him. She later calls in this favor to have Bharata crowned king and Rama sent into forest, inspired by the words of her maid Manthara. So what was the promise made by Dasharatha? Dasharatha was engaged in a battle, and as the battle was progressing, so somebody or somehow the wheel of his chariot, that the plug or something which holds the wheel, that was removed. So if it was to go on for some time, definitely the wheel would be lost, and then that would be the death of Dasharatha. Kaikeyi, seeing that, what does she do? She places her hand instead of this iron pin which would hold the wheel together, so that the battle would go on, and thus saved the king. So for her sacrifice and that attendance, the king promises her anything what he would do for her, which she would ask. Now that promise which Dasharatha had made to her youngest wife, that is Kaikeyi, now she recalls this promise of the king Dasharatha at a time when Rama is about to be ascending to the throne, or the rightful heir to the king, to be made as king. Now she recalls the promise of Dasharatha made to her and tells that Bharata should be made a king instead Rama, and Rama is sent on exile. So that was the promise which Dasharatha had made to her, and she makes use of this promise, or the promise made to her prompted by her maid Manthara. Then we have a lot of other characters which are coming into the play in Ramayana. For example, Sumitra, Kausalya, Manthara, Guha, Kaushalya, then Bharata, Shatrughna, then Shurpanaga, the sister of Ravana. She is a powerful Rakshasi. She attempts to seduce Rama and kill Sita, but the princely brothers attack her. She tries to muster the Rakshasa army against Rama. It is a Shurpanaga, that is sister of Ravana, a powerful Rakshasi. Then we have the Jatyu, the powerful golden eagle who speaks in the voice of human being. He was loyal to King Dasharatha and pledges his service to Rama. He dies defending Sita from Ravana. So that is something about the characters which we come across. We have another interesting one, that is of the Kabantha, a terrible Rakshasa who has the form of a body with no legs or head, only arms and a gaping mouth. He was transformed into this ugly shape by Indra. Formerly, he was a celestial archer. He tells the brothers to seek Sugriva, the prince of Vanaras. Who is Sugriva? Sugriva is a dominant figure in the Ramayana story because he is the king of the Vanara Sainya. The rightful king of Vanaras, a race of magical monkeys. He was usurped by his brother Vali and pledges his service to Rama and Lakshmana if they can restore him to his throne. So that is Sugriva. Then we have the Hanuman, advisor to Sugriva. He is the son of a wind god Vayu and a Vanari woman. So we can see so many heavenly figures really involved in the story of Ramayana. So already we have said Rama and Sita, the incarnation of Vishnu and the goddess, that is Lakshmi, the consort of Vishnu. And then so many figures are put it together. Then we have one figure, that is Kumbhakarna, Ravana's brother. He is a giant with infinite strength who sleeps for 6 months at a time before waking up and eating everything he can see. So he is called Kumbhakarna, that is Ravana's brother. So some of the figures are those, just to get introduced into those. The next class we will deal on the themes which are occurring in the Ramayana. Other characters you will be able to get through the notes. There are different characters, you can have a glance through them, but the prominent and important ones you can have an eye on that, so that you will be really getting into the real story or how the story is knit together. Tomorrow we will deal with the Ramayana themes. What are the main themes coming in this story of Ramayana?